They told me from the moment I could understand words that I was born to die. Not someday like everyone else, but specifically, deliberately, in place of someone who mattered. And the cruelest part, I believed them. I believed I was nothing more than a shadow meant to take a bullet, a curse, a blade, whatever death came for the Alpha King. My name is Maybelle, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the person you're supposed to die for decides you're worth living for instead. But before I tell you how it all fell apart or came together depending on how you look at it, let me take you back to the beginning. Because you need to understand what it means to be raised as a thing rather than a person. You need to know what they did to me, to all of us Decoy brides, to understand why what he did was so unforgivable, so beautiful, so absolutely devastating that it broke everything I thought I knew about the world. I was 4 years old when my mother sold me. I remember that day with the kind of clarity that trauma brings. Every detail sharp as broken glass. We lived in the outskirts of the Crescent Moon-packed territory, in one of those forgotten villages where poverty clung to everything like morning fog. My mother, Martha, was a washerwoman with hands rubbed raw from lye soap and winters that never seemed to end. My father had died in the mines when I was 2. I don't remember him, just the space where he should have been. The woman who came for me wore clothes I'd never seen before. Smooth fabrics that didn't have patches, boots without holes. Her name was Cordelia, and she smiled at me with teeth too white, too perfect. She knelt down and touched my chin, turning my face side to side like I was a horse she was considering purchasing. "Good bone structure," she said to my mother, not to me. Never to me. "Hair's the right color. Eyes will do. She's small for her age, but we can work with that. The Alpha King's future mate is petite. This one will match well enough when she's grown." My mother's fingers trembled as she took the purse of coins. I remember reaching for her saying, "Mama," in that questioning way children do when they sense something is wrong but don't have words for it yet. She didn't look at me. That's what I remember most. She took the money and turned away, and I was led to a carriage by a woman who smelled like lavender and lies. "You're going to have a better life," Cordelia told me as the carriage pulled away. Through the small window, I watched my village disappear. "You're going to live in a beautiful place, eat fine food, wear pretty dresses. Aren't you lucky?" I was 4. I didn't know that luck and curses sometimes wear the same face. The Decoy house sat on the eastern edge of the Royal Pack's territory, hidden behind walls and willow trees. It was beautiful in the way mausoleums are beautiful. Pristine, cold, untouched by anything as messy as real life. There were 12 of us girls when I arrived. By the time I turned 18 there would be 30. They brought us in from all over. Poor families mostly, people who couldn't afford to keep their daughters, people who saw an opportunity in their child's face. We all looked similar enough. Fair skin, dark hair, delicate features. We were all approximately the same age as Genevieve, the true Alpha King's intended mate. The woman who had been chosen for him since birth by the moon goddess herself according to the prophecies. That's what they told us anyway. That Genevieve was sacred, special. The one whose union with the Alpha King would bring prosperity and peace to all the packs. And because she was so important, so valuable, she needed protection. She needed decoys. You see, there was a curse. An old one, whispered about in the dark corners of pack history. Every Alpha King of the Shadowfang line, for the last 7 generations, had died on their wedding night. Not from natural causes. Not from accidents. They were murdered, poisoned, stabbed, throats torn out. Always on the night they took their mate. Always before the bond could be completed. And with each Alpha King's death, chaos followed. Wars. Famine. Years of bloodshed until the next heir came of age. The Council of Elders had tried everything. Extra guards. Food tasters. Keeping the wedding location secret. Nothing worked. Death found a way, every single time, like it had been invited to the ceremony personally. So they came up with a new strategy. A desperate one. Because if Death was coming for the Alpha King on his wedding night, then they would give Death multiple targets. Multiple brides, all dressed the same, all veiled, scattered throughout the venue. The real Genevieve would be hidden among us, protected by our similarity. And if the assassin struck one of us instead, well, That was the point, wasn't it? We were the acceptable losses. The human shields. The girls whose deaths wouldn't matter because we'd been bought and paid for with that exact purpose in mind. They didn't tell us all of this at once, of course. At 4 years old, I was just told I was learning to be a helper for someone very important. That I was training for a special role. The truth came in pieces, year by year, as we grew old enough to understand what we were. By the time I was 10, I knew I would probably die before I turned 20. By the time I was 15, I had accepted it. By the time I was 18, I had stopped feeling anything at all. Life in the Decoy house was strange, a mixture of luxury and imprisonment. We ate food most common wolves never tasted. We wore training dresses made of silk and satin. We were taught to walk gracefully, to sit properly, to smile without showing too much emotion. We learned the same things Genevieve was learning, read the same books, practiced the same arts. We had to be convincing copies, after all. But we weren't people. We were investments, products being refined for a single use. The woman who ran the Decoy house was named Theodora, and she was neither cruel nor kind. She was efficient. She looked at us the way a general looks at soldiers, necessary casualties in a larger war. Some of the girls tried to befriend her, to win her favor. Never worked. Theodora didn't see individuals. She saw inventory. Your value, she told us over and over in that crisp voice of hers, is in your service. Your worth is in your sacrifice. The greatest thing you will ever do is die so that something greater can live. We heard this so many times it became a rhythm in our blood. A heartbeat made of words. You don't matter. You don't matter. You don't matter. I became close with 3 of the girls. Florence, Harriet, and Lucille. We were the same age, had arrived within months of each other, and had adjacent rooms on the 3rd floor. At night, after Theodora made her final rounds, we would sneak into each other's rooms and whisper in the dark. Florence was the brave one, the one who sometimes talked about escaping. What if we just ran, she'd say. What if we just disappeared into the forest and never came back? They'd find us, Harriet would respond. Harriet was the practical one, the one who understood the world's cruelty with a clarity that hurt to witness. We're branded. The mark on our wrists. Every patrol knows what it means. We're property. She was right. When we turned 12, they gave us each a small tattoo on our inner left wrist, a crescent moon with a crack through it. The mark of a decoy. The mark that said we belonged to the program, to the crown, to a fate we couldn't escape. Lucille was the quiet one, the dreamer. She used to tell us stories at night. Made-up tales about girls who became birds and flew away, about wolves who fell in love with the moon, about magic that could rewrite the rules. I loved her stories, even though I knew they were lies. Especially because I knew they were lies. Sometimes lies are the only things that keep you sane. Do you think it hurts? Florence asked one night. We were 16 then, 2 years away from the Alpha King's coronation and wedding. Dying, I mean. Everything hurts, Harriet said softly. That's just how life is. Maybe it's fast, Lucille offered. Maybe you don't even feel it. One moment you're there and then you're not. I didn't say anything. I had stopped wondering about death and started wondering about what came before it. Would I be scared? Would I cry? Would I embarrass myself? Or would I face it with dignity? Would I feel anything at all? Or had they successfully carved out the part of me that cared about living? I didn't know then that I would find out the answer. That I would stand face to face with death and discover what I was actually made of underneath all that training, all that resignation, all that carefully constructed numbness. We saw Genevieve exactly once before the wedding. It was 6 months before the ceremony, during what Theodora called a synchronization assessment. They brought her to the Decoy house so the council could verify that we still resembled her closely enough, that the deception would hold. We stood in a line in the grand hall, all 30 of us, while Genevieve walked past with members of the council. She wore a simple dress, much simpler than ours actually, and her hair was pulled back in a practical braid. She looked nervous, uncomfortable, nothing like the untouchable figure they'd built up in our minds. When she passed me, our eyes met for just a second. I saw something in her face I didn't expect. Guilt. She knew. Course she knew. She knew we were there to die so she could live. And unlike Theodora, unlike the council, unlike all the people who had constructed this system, Genevieve seemed to understand that this was horrifying. That we were people who had been turned into shields. She opened her mouth like she was going to speak to me, but one of the council members, a stern wolf named Percival, placed a hand on her elbow and guided her along. That night, Florence came to my room. "Did you see her face?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "She looked sad." "Doesn't change anything." "No," Florence agreed. "But at least she's not happy about it. That's something, isn't it? At least we're not dying for someone who thinks we deserve it." I wanted to tell Florence that it didn't matter, that Genevieve's guilt changed nothing about our fate. But I couldn't because part of me, a small, stubborn part one thought I'd killed years ago, was glad. Glad that at least someone saw us. Someone knew this was wrong. It wouldn't save us, but it meant we weren't invisible. Not completely. We met the Alpha King 3 months before the wedding. His name was Theodore, a strong old name that fit him like his title. He was 25 years old, newly crowned after his father's death from illness. The ceremony was called a presentation, but it was really just another inspection. He needed to see his potential brides, his potential victims, his shields. They dressed us identically that day. White gowns with silver embroidery, hair styled the same way, even the same shade of lip color. We were meant to be indistinguishable, interchangeable. 30 versions of the same sacrifice. Theodore entered the hall with a presence that made the air feel heavier. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that looked like storm clouds, gray with hints of something dangerous underneath. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair, like even his face was part of the cruelty of this situation. Of course the man we might die for would be beautiful, course. But what struck me most wasn't his appearance. It was the look on his face as he walked down our line. He looked haunted. Every decoy he passed, his jaw tightened a little more. His hands, clasped behind his back, were white-knuckled. By the time he reached me, I was number 17 in the line. He had stopped making eye contact with any of us. Theodora stood beside him, explaining the security measures, the distribution plan for the wedding, how we would be scattered throughout the venue to maximize protection. Theodore wasn't listening. I could tell because his breathing had changed, become shallower, faster. When Theodora finished her presentation, she clearly expected him to say something. To thank the council, to praise the program, to acknowledge the necessity of our sacrifice. Instead he said, "They're children." His voice was rough, like the words hurt coming out. "They're 18, Your Majesty," Theodora corrected smoothly. "Legal adults. Old enough to fulfill their duty." "They're children," he repeated, and this time he did look at us. His eyes moved down the line slowly, and when they reached mine they stopped. For a moment, just a moment, I felt seen. Not as a decoy, not as a product, but as a person. Someone looked at me and saw that this was wrong. Then he turned to the council. "I want to speak with them. Individually." The council members exchanged glances. Percival stepped forward. "Your Majesty, that's not protocol. These are security assets, not." "They're people," Theodore interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "And I want to speak with them. Unless you're telling me I don't have that authority." It was a power play, and the council knew it. He was the Alpha King. They couldn't refuse him directly. "Of course, Your Majesty," Percival said, his jaw tight. "Though we must insist on time constraints. The wedding preparations." "I'll be quick," Theodore said, though his tone suggested he'd take as long as he damn well pleased. They set up the meetings in the library, a beautiful room I'd always loved, with high windows and shelves that reached the ceiling. Each of us had 10 minutes. 30 girls, 300 minutes total. 5 hours of his day devoted to looking at the faces of people who might die for him. I was somewhere in the middle of the rotation, which gave me time to worry about what I would say. What did you say to someone you might die protecting? Thank you for being worth my life. Sorry in advance if I get blood on your wedding day. Florence went before me. When she came out, she looked shaken. He asked me what I wanted to be, she whispered as we passed. If I could be anything, what I would choose. What did you say? I didn't know how to answer. What a strange question to ask someone like us. When my turn came, I entered the library with my practiced posture, my trained smile, my perfected mask of serene acceptance. Theodore stood by the window, looking out at the grounds. He didn't turn when I entered. You can sit, he said quietly. I sat in one of the leather chairs, hands folded in my lap like Theodora had taught us. Proper, submissive, invisible. Theodore finally turned to look at me, and up close, the haunted quality in his eyes was even more pronounced. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, like he was being crushed under the weight of something too heavy to carry. What's your name? He asked. I'm Decoy 17, Your Majesty. That's not what I asked. I hesitated. We'd been discouraged from using our names, from thinking of ourselves as individuals. It made the system work better, Theodora said, if we remembered we were parts of a whole, not separate people with separate lives. Maybelle, I said finally. My name is Maybelle. He closed his eyes briefly, like my name caused him physical pain. Maybelle, he repeated. That's a beautiful name. Thank you, Your Majesty. Stop calling me that, please. Theodore is fine. This felt like a trap. Nothing about our training had prepared us for an alpha king who didn't want to be called by his title. I don't think that's appropriate, I said carefully. None of this is appropriate, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. None of this is right or fair or... He cut himself off, ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. This isn't your burden. But it wasn't it? His survival was literally our burden. Purpose. Our only value. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. Do you want to die? The question was so blunt it shocked me. Not are you prepared to fulfill your duty? Or do you understand the honor of your sacrifice? Just, do you want to die? No one wants to die, I said slowly. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He studied me for a long moment. You're angry, he said finally. You hide it well, but you're angry. I can see it. Was I? I'd stopped examining my feelings so long ago I wasn't sure I knew how to anymore. Anger required energy, required hope that things could be different. I'd learned to save my energy for surviving, not feeling. I'm whatever I need to be, I said. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. His words cracked something in me. A fissure in the wall I'd built around everything soft, everything that could hurt. I felt suddenly, absurdly close to tears, and I couldn't afford that. Couldn't afford to fall apart in front of him. Why are you doing this? I asked, and my voice came out harder than I meant it to. Why are you asking us these questions? Does it make you feel better? Does it ease your conscience to know our names, to see our faces, to confirm that yes, we're real people who are going to die for you? I expected him to be angry at my insolence, to have me removed, maybe punished for speaking to him that way. Instead, he looked relieved. There you are, he said softly. There's the real person under all that training. You don't know me. No, he agreed. But I want to. I want to know all of you. Every single girl in that line. Because if I'm going to let this happen, if I'm going to stand by and let any of you die in my place, I need to know exactly what it costs. I need it to hurt. Why? Because maybe if it hurts enough, I'll find another way. I laughed then, and it was not a kind sound. There is no other way. 7 generations of Alpha Kings have tried. This is the only solution that works. The only solution they've found, he corrected. That doesn't mean it's the only one that exists. 3 months, I said. You have 3 months to rewrite prophecy, break a generation's old curse, and convince the council to abandon their only plan. Forgive me if I don't hold my breath. Would you want me to try? He asked. If I could find another way, a way where nobody has to die, where you could have a real life, a real future, would you want that? It was a cruel question. Crueler than anything Theodora had ever said, because it asked me to hope. To imagine a future I'd trained myself not to want. It doesn't matter what I want, I said. It matters to me. The 10 minutes were up. A knock on the door signaled that my time was over, that the next girl was waiting. I stood, smoothed my dress, prepared to return to being Decoy 17. Maybelle, Theodore said as I reached the door. Turned back. I'm going to try, he said. I need you to know that. I'm going to try to find another way. I didn't tell him it was impossible. I didn't tell him not to bother, that we were already dead and had been since we were sold at 4 years old. I didn't tell him that hope was a luxury girls like us couldn't afford. I just nodded and left. But that night, alone in my room, I let myself imagine something different. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember what hope felt like before I put it away again. The next 3 months were strange. Theodore kept his word, he was trying. We heard about it through rumors, through whispered conversations between council members that we weren't supposed to overhear. He brought in scholars, historians, curse breakers from every pack. He studied the old texts, searching for loopholes, for some detail his ancestors had missed. He even went to the sacred grove where the prophecies were kept, spending 3 days there alone, seeking guidance from the moon goddess herself. Nothing worked. Every avenue led to the same conclusion. The curse was absolute. An alpha king of the Shadowfang line would die on his wedding night. The only variable was whether he died alone or took his mate with him. The decoy system was the only thing that had ever worked, the only innovation that had saved both the alpha king and his true mate. By hiding the real Genevieve among us, by making death choose from 30 identical targets, they'd finally found a way to beat the curse. The assassin, whoever or whatever it was, would strike randomly, would kill one of us instead of Theodore or Genevieve. The bond between true mates would be completed, and the cycle would finally break. All it cost was one disposable life. In the week before the wedding, they increased our training. We practiced walking in formation, standing in designated positions, responding to emergencies. They wanted us so synchronized that even under stress, we'd maintain the illusion of being one person multiplied. Florence was struggling. I could see it in the way her hands shook during practice, the way she kept looking at the doors like she was calculating distances, exit routes, possibilities for escape. Don't, I told her one night. We were in her room, sitting on her bed like we had 1,000 times before. Whatever you're thinking, don't. I'm going to die in 5 days, she said flatly. Maybe. 1 in 30 chance. Do you know what those odds feel like? The same as they've always been. No. She shook her head. No, it's different now. Before it was abstract. Someday. Eventually. Now it's Thursday. I'm going to die on Thursday, and the worst part is I might not. I might watch one of you die instead. Which is worse, Maybelle? Dying or surviving and knowing someone else died in your place? I didn't have an answer for that. He tried, Florence continued. Theodore tried to save us. That almost makes it worse, doesn't it? That someone actually cared, and it still wasn't enough. At least we mattered to someone, I said. Even if just for a little while. You sound like you're in love with him. Was I? I'd been thinking about Theodore more than I should. About the way he looked at us like we were people. About how he'd spent 3 months fighting for a way to save girls he barely knew. About the sound of my name in his mouth, how it felt like being real for the first time in my life. Doesn't matter, I said. In 5 days, this is all over one way or another. But it did matter. I was starting to realize it mattered more than anything. The day before the wedding, Theodore broke protocol again. He came to the decoy house alone, without guards, without permission from the council. Theodora tried to stop him at the door, but he used his alpha command, that irresistible force in his voice that compelled obedience from all wolves. Gather them, he ordered. All of them. Now, we assembled in the great hall, all 30 of us, while Theodore stood before us. He looked terrible, exhausted, desperate, like he'd been fighting a war inside his own head and losing. "I failed," he said without preamble. "I tried everything. Every ritual, every counter-curse, every possible alternative. There's no way out. The curse is absolute." We already knew this, but hearing him say it made it real in a new way. "Tomorrow one of you will die," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "And I will have to live with that. I will have to wake up every day for the rest of my life knowing that I survived because someone else, someone young, someone who never had a chance to really live, took my death for me." "That's our purpose," Harriet said from somewhere in the group. "That's what we were made for." "You weren't made for anything," Theodore said fiercely. "You were stolen. But trained to believe your lives don't matter. But they do. Every single one of you matters. And I need you to know that. I need you to know that even though I can't save you, I see you. I know you're real. I know this is murder dressed up as duty. And I will never forgive myself for it. Never." Theodora stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this display is inappropriate. These girls have been prepared for their role. You're only making it harder." "Good," Theodore snarled. "It should be hard. Should be impossible. We should all have to live with how hard this is." He looked at each of us, and when his eyes found mine they held. "I'm sorry," he said, and I knew he was talking to all of us, but somehow it felt personal, like he was apologizing specifically to me. "I'm so sorry." Then he left. And we stood there in silence, processing what had just happened. "Well," Lucille said finally, "at least we'll haunt someone who deserves to be haunted." It was such an unexpected comment that several girls laughed. Sharp, slightly hysterical laughter, but laughter nonetheless. That night the 4 of us, Florence, Harriet, Lucille and I, stayed up until dawn. We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked about memories, about the lives we'd had before the Decoy house, about the things we wished we'd done. "I wish I'd kissed someone," Florence said. "Just once. I wish I knew what that felt like." "I wish I'd seen the ocean," Harriet added. "My mother used to tell me about it. Water as far as you can see." "I wish I'd finished my story," Lucille said quietly. "The one about the girl who became a bird. I never figured out the ending." They all looked at me. "What do you wish, Maybelle?" I thought about Theodore's eyes, about being seen, about the feeling of mattering to someone even briefly. "I wish I'd had time to be loved," I said. "Really loved. Not as a shield or a sacrifice, but as myself." We fell asleep tangled together on Harriet's bed, holding hands like children afraid of the dark. It was the last peaceful moment we would ever have. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, warm sun, the kind of day that felt like a mockery of what was about to happen. They dressed us in identical gowns, white silk with silver embroidery, long sleeves, high collars, veils that fell to our shoulders. The veils were the key. They obscured our faces just enough that even someone looking closely couldn't be certain which one of us was which. Genevieve was among us somewhere. I didn't know which one she was. None of us did. That was the point. Even we couldn't reveal the truth because we didn't know it. The wedding was being held in the sacred grove, a massive clearing surrounded by ancient trees. There were hundreds of guests, pack leaders from across the territory, nobles, council members. But they weren't the danger. The curse didn't work through guests. It worked through something else. An assassin that appeared from nowhere, struck, and vanished. A supernatural killer that had never been caught, never been stopped. Until the decoy system. We were positioned throughout the grove, each of us standing in designated spots that created a pattern. A net meant to catch death, to spread it thin across 30 targets instead of focusing it on one. I was stationed near the eastern edge, between 2 massive oak trees. From where I stood, I could see the altar where Theodore waited. He wore ceremonial robes, black and silver, the colors of his bloodline. He looked like a king. He looked like a man about to break. The ceremony began. A priestess spoke words about destiny and duty, about bonds blessed by the moon goddess. I barely heard them. My entire body was tense, waiting. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every movement in the crowd could be the assassin. When did it happen in previous generations? I tried to remember the stories. During the vows. After. Was there a pattern or was it random? The priestess called for the bride to approach the altar. One of us began walking. I couldn't see who from my position, couldn't tell if it was Genevieve or another decoy. She moved with perfect grace, perfect calm. Whoever she was, she'd been well trained. Theodore watched her approach, and even from a distance, I could see the tension in his body. He didn't want this. Any of this. The bride reached the altar. The priestess began the binding ceremony, the part where the mate bond would be completed, where two souls would be tied together forever. That's when I felt it. Change in the air. A coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. Like something had torn through the fabric of reality and stepped into our world. I saw Theodore's eyes widen. He felt it too. And then everything happened at once. The assassin appeared. Not from the crowd, not from the trees, but from nowhere. One moment empty space. The next moment a figure in black, moving with impossible speed toward the altar. Toward the bride. Guards rushed forward, but they were too slow. They were always too slow. This thing, this curse made manifest, couldn't be stopped by ordinary means. The blade in the assassin's hand gleamed silver. Blessed silver, the kind that could kill anything. The bride at the altar didn't move. Didn't scream. Just stood there, accepting what was coming. And Theodore did something no Alpha King had ever done before. He moved. Faster than should have been possible. He positioned himself between the assassin and the bride. Between death and its target. No! Someone screamed. Me, I realized. I was screaming. The blade meant for the bride struck Theodore instead. Buried itself in his chest, right over his heart. Time seemed to stop. Theodore looked down at the blade, then up at the assassin. And he smiled. Actually smiled. Wrong target, he said, blood beginning to seep through his ceremonial robes. You lose. The assassin flickered, like it was having trouble maintaining its form. Its hand released the blade, and it stepped back, looking almost confused. Then it vanished, dissolving into nothing, and I understood. The curse required a death on the wedding night. An Alpha King of the Shadowfang line. But Theodore had volunteered. Had chosen death. Had offered himself willingly instead of letting it be taken from someone else. And somehow that was different. That changed the rules. Theodore collapsed and chaos erupted. The bride, Genevieve, I realized the veiled figure was actually Genevieve, screamed and caught him. Healers rushed forward. The council shouted orders. I was running before I made the conscious decision to move. Past guards, past protocols, past everything I'd been trained to do. I reached the altar and dropped to my knees beside Theodore. His eyes found mine. Maybelle, he said, my name thick with blood. You idiot, I sobbed. You absolute idiot. What did you do? Found another way. He coughed, red staining his lips. Can't die. For someone else. Anymore. Changed the rules. You're not making sense. Stop talking. Save your strength. Had to try, he continued, ignoring me completely. Had to. You asked what I wanted. Remember. In the library. I wanted you to have a life. A real life. The healers were working on him, pulling out the blade, trying to stop the bleeding. But there was so much blood. Too much. Stay with me, I begged. Please stay. You can't save me just to leave me. That's not fair. Theodore, that's not fair. His hand found mine. Squeezed weakly. Tell me about the ocean, Harriet said. Wanted to see it. Tell me what it's like. I'd never seen the ocean. I didn't know. But he was dying and he needed something, so I lied. It's beautiful, I whispered. The water goes on forever. Blue and green and silver, all mixed together. And the sound, it's like breathing, like the earth itself is breathing. Waves come in and out, and you can feel it in your chest. The salt in the air makes everything taste different. And the sun on the water sparkles like diamonds, like the whole world is covered in stars even in daylight. Sounds perfect, he breathed. We'll go there, I said desperately. When you're better. Take you. We'll stand in the water and feel the waves, and you'll see how beautiful it is. So you have to stay. You have to. But his eyes were closing. His grip on my hand was loosening. Theodore, I sobbed. Please. Please don't go. Maybelle. His voice was barely a whisper. Did it work? Are you free? I looked up at Theodora, at the council, at all the people who had built the system that made girls like me disposable. And I saw on their faces that something had changed. The assassin was gone. The curse had been broken, not by hiding death, not by tricking it, but by someone choosing it willingly. Changing the equation entirely. Yes, I told him, tears streaming down my face. Yes, it worked. We're free. You saved us. He smiled then. A real smile, peaceful and beautiful and heartbreaking. Good, he whispered. That's good. And then he was gone. Theodore, the Alpha King who had tried to rewrite destiny, who had seen us when no one else would, who had chosen to die so that girls like me could live. He died in my arms while the sun shone and birds sang and the world kept spinning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The healers pronounced him dead at 3:47 in the afternoon. The council went into immediate emergency session. The pack needed an alpha, and Theodore had no heir. His younger brother, Nathaniel, would have to be crowned, and quickly. But first, they had to deal with the aftermath of what Theodore had done. I sat beside his body and refused to move. Guards tried to pull me away. Council members ordered me back to the Decoy house. Theodora herself came and told me I was being inappropriate, that this wasn't my place, that I needed to remember my position. I looked at her with eyes gone cold and said, "He's dead because of you. Because of all of you. You built a system that made murder acceptable as long as the right people survived. No. I'm not moving. And if you try to force me, I'll make sure every pack in this territory knows exactly what the Decoy house is. What you did to 30 girls. Let's see how your necessary sacrifice sounds when everyone knows the details." Theodora paled. But she stepped back. Genevieve knelt beside me. She'd removed her veil, and her face was streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I knew about the system. I knew you were there to die for me, and I let it happen. I was a coward." "You were a prisoner too," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Just in a different cage." "He loved you," Genevieve said quietly. "Did you know? These last 3 months, all he talked about was the Decoy girls. How to save you. But especially you. Well. He said your name like it meant something." I closed my eyes against fresh tears. I barely knew him. "Sometimes that's enough," she said. "Sometimes a moment of being really seen by someone is worth more than a lifetime of being ignored." The sun was setting when they finally took Theodore's body away to prepare it for the funeral rites. I watched them carry him and I felt something crack open inside me. Not just grief but rage. Burning, purifying rage. Theodore had died to free us, but freedom meant nothing if the system that created us remained intact. If other girls could be bought and trained and taught they were disposable. If the Decoy house could just continue. I stood up, my white wedding dress stained with Theodore's blood, and I walked straight to where the council was convening. Guards moved to stop me, but something in my face made them hesitate. I pushed open the doors to their chambers. "Who authorized you?" Percival began. "Shut up," I said, and my voice carried an authority I'd never heard in it before. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was just that I'd run out of fear. "You're going to listen to me. All of you. Remove her," Percival ordered the guards. "Touch her and I'll make sure your role in the Decoy program becomes very, very public. came a voice from behind me. Turn. Genevieve stood there, and beside her were Florence, Harriet, Lucille, and all the other Decoy girls. 30 of us, still in our identical dresses, still marked with our crescent moon scars. All of us, Genevieve continued. We'll all testify. Every detail, every payment, every girl bought from her family, every lesson where you taught them they were worthless. Everything. The council members looked at each other. They were calculating, I could see it, weighing the cost of exposure against the cost of letting us speak. The curse is broken, I said. Theodore broke it by choosing death willingly. The Decoy house has no purpose anymore. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to shut it down. You're going to send every girl home with enough gold to start a real life. You're going to make it illegal, officially, publicly illegal, to buy children for any reason. And you're going to do it in Theodore's name, as his final decree. He's dead, Percival said coldly. He can't make decrees. Then consider it a request from his grieving mate, Genevieve said. I am still the Luna of this pack, even if the mating bond was never completed. And these are my terms for not starting a civil war over what was done in my name. It was a bluff, probably. But the council didn't know that. They looked at 30 angry girls and one determined Luna, and they did the political calculus. 3 days later, the decree was issued. The Decoy house was officially disbanded. Every girl received restitution, enough to live on for years if they were careful. The practice of buying children was made illegal under penalty of exile. It wasn't justice, not really. Justice would have been Theodore alive. Justice would have been Theodore alive. Justice would have been 30 girls who never lost their childhoods. But it was something. It was change. And it was purchased with Theodore's life. His funeral was held on a gray morning that matched the mood of the entire pack. Thousands attended. He'd been loved despite his short reign. Or maybe because of it. In 3 months, he'd done more to challenge the old cruel systems than generations of alpha kings before him. They burned his body on a pyre in the sacred grove, according to tradition. I stood with the other Decoy girls, all of us still wearing white, and we watched the flames take the man who'd seen us as people. Harriet held my hand on one side. Florence held the other. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say that the fire wasn't already saying for us. After the ceremony, as people began to disperse, Nathaniel approached me. Theodore's younger brother looked like him but softer, less haunted. He'd been crowned Alpha King that morning in a private ceremony. Maybelle, he said quietly. May I speak with you? We walked away from the crowd, to a small clearing where we could talk privately. My brother left something for you, Nathaniel said, pulling a sealed letter from his jacket. He wrote it the night before the wedding. Asked me to deliver it if things went wrong. My hands shook as I took the letter. Theodore's handwriting was on the envelope. For Maybelle if I fail. He talked about you constantly these last months, Nathaniel continued. Drove me mad with it, honestly. Maybelle this, Maybelle that. I thought he was losing his mind, fixating on a girl he barely knew. But I understand now. You weren't just a girl to him. You were proof that the system was broken. That things had to change. He barely knew me, I said, echoing what I'd told Genevieve. He knew you enough, Nathaniel said. Enough to die for you. That's not nothing. After he left, I sat on a stone bench and opened the letter with trembling fingers. Dear Maybelle, if you're reading this, then I've failed to find another way, and the wedding happened as planned. Sorry. I know I promised to try, and I did, but clearly it wasn't enough. By now, you probably know what I did. I couldn't let you die, Maybelle. Couldn't let any of you die. I know that sounds arrogant. Who am I to decide my life is worth less than yours? But the truth is, your life was never worth less. You were just told it was, so many times you started to believe it. The curse requires a death. I've studied it from every angle, consulted every expert, and that part is non-negotiable. An alpha king of Shadowfang blood must die on his wedding night. But I found something in the old texts that everyone else missed. The curse specifies that death must come for the alpha king. It doesn't say anything about the alpha king running toward death instead. I hope that by choosing it, by volunteering, I'll change the equation somehow. Death has always taken us. Maybe if I give myself instead, it'll break the pattern. If it doesn't work, if I'm just dead and you're still trapped, then I'm sorry for wasting my life on a theory. But if it does work, if you're reading this as a free woman, then I need you to know it was worth it. You asked me in the library what I wanted. I didn't answer honestly then because I didn't want to be cruel. But I'll tell you now. I wanted time with you. Not as an alpha king and a decoy. Just as Theodore and Maybelle. Two people who might have met in a different life, under different circumstances, and become something to each other. I wanted to take you to the ocean. I wanted to hear you laugh without it sounding like surprise. I wanted to watch you discover who you are when you're not being what other people made you. I wanted to love you and be loved by you and have enough time for that to mean something. But we don't get that time. And I'm angry about it, Maybelle. I'm so angry I could burn the world down. But I'm also grateful because at least I got to know you existed. At least I got to see your face and hear your name and understand that people like you, real, angry, beautiful people, were being destroyed by a system I inherited. Live, Maybelle. That's all I ask. Live loudly and fully and without apology. Take up space. Make noise. Be inconvenient and difficult and gloriously, defiantly alive. Go to the ocean. See it for both of us. Kiss someone like Florence wanted. Finish Lucille's story about the bird girl. Help Harriet find the practical path forward. Save Florence from her nightmares. And if you think of me sometimes, remember that I chose this. Nobody made me. Nobody forced my hand. I chose you, all of you, over a system that demanded your deaths. And I'd choose it again. You matter, Maybelle. You always did. Yours in whatever comes after this, Theodore. I read the letter 3 times, there in the clearing, while the gray morning slowly brightened into afternoon. And then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket, over my heart, and I made a promise to a dead man. I would live. We all would. We would be everything they told us we couldn't be. And we would make sure no one ever forgot what it cost. The next year was strange. A mixture of grief and freedom, of learning who we were when we weren't defined by our deaths. The council kept their word about the restitution. Every decoy girl received enough gold to start over. Some went home to their families, though many of those reunions were complicated. How do you forgive a parent who sold you? Some couldn't. Some found a way. Florence used her money to buy a small bookshop in the capital. She sent me a letter 6 months after the wedding. I'm learning to sleep without nightmares. Some nights I manage it. Come visit when you can. Bring the others. Harriet became a healer. She said she'd spent so much time preparing for death that she wanted to dedicate her life to preventing it. She was good at it too. Practical, efficient, unsentimental in the best way. Lucille finished her story about the girl who became a bird. She published it under a pseudonym, but I knew it was her. The ending was different than I expected. The bird girl didn't fly away to escape. She flew to see what was worth staying for, and then she chose to come back. Because freedom isn't about running. It's about choosing. As for me, I wandered for a while. Used Theodore's gift, because that's what his death was, a gift, to see things I'd never seen. I went to the ocean like he'd asked. Stood in the waves and cried like a child, because it was exactly as beautiful as I'd described to him, and he would never see it. I traveled to different packs, different territories. And everywhere I went I told our story. Not the sanitized version the council preferred, but the real one. I told them about 30 girls bought and trained to die. I told them about an alpha king who chose differently. Some people didn't want to hear it. Called me a troublemaker, a liar, a bitter woman who couldn't let the past go. But others listened. And more importantly, they acted. Other packs began examining their own practices, their own systems that treated some lives as more valuable than others. It wasn't a revolution, but it was something. It was change, slow and painful and necessary. On the first anniversary of Theodore's death, All 30 of us returned to the sacred grove. We brought flowers, wildflowers, not the expensive formal arrangements the pack had left at his memorial. We stood in a circle where the altar had been, where he'd chosen death over murder. Should we say something? Florence asked. Some kind of tribute. He didn't do it for tributes, Harriet said. He did it because it was right. He did it because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't, Lucille added. They all looked at me, and I realized they expected me to speak. I was the one he'd spoken to most. The one whose name was in his final letter. The one who'd held him while he died. He was an idiot, I said, and several girls gasped. No, listen. He was an idiot who thought one life could change a system built over generations. Who thought his death could somehow balance the scales for what was done to us. And in a way he was right. Because his death did change things. But not because his life was worth more than ours. Because he made us worth something to ourselves. I looked around at the circle of faces. Women now, not girls. Survivors. Free. Before him we were decoys. Puppies. Disposable. He was the first person who looked at us and saw originals. Saw people. And maybe that doesn't seem like much, but it was everything. Because once one person sees you, really sees you, you can't go back to being invisible. You can't accept being treated as less. So what do we do now? Florence asked. How do we honor that? We live, I said, repeating Theodore's words. We live loudly and take up space and refuse to be convenient. We make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. We tell the truth, even when people don't want to hear it. That's how we honor him. By being exactly who he died to let us become. We stood there until sunset, telling stories about Theodore, the few memories we had of him, the moments that mattered. And then we told stories about each other, about who we were becoming, about the lives we were building from the ashes of the ones that were stolen. As darkness fell, I felt something shift. Not grief disappearing, it would never disappear completely. But grief. Settling. Finding a place to exist alongside everything else. Alongside hope and anger and love and the fierce determination to make his choice mean something. 3 years after the wedding that never was, I received a letter from Genevieve. She'd stepped down as Luna. The position felt wrong to her when the mating bond had never been completed. Nathaniel had taken a chosen mate, a woman named Violet who was practical and kind and nothing like what the prophecies had demanded. The old ways are dying, Genevieve wrote. Slowly, but dying nonetheless. Nathaniel is nothing like Theodore in personality, but he honors his brother's legacy by questioning everything our ancestors took for granted. The council hates it, of course. But the people love him for it. I've started a school for girls from poor families. Free education, no strings attached. I call it the Maybelle Institute if you don't mind. Because you were the first one brave enough to get angry, to demand better, to refuse to disappear quietly. Come visit when you can. I'd like to show you what we're building. I went. And what I saw took my breath away. A beautiful building on the edge of the capital, with bright windows and gardens. Girls learning to read, to write, to think critically. Learning trades and arts and how to take care of themselves. Learning that they mattered. No one will ever buy another girl from her family, Genevieve said as we walked through the classrooms. Not in this pack. Not while I have any influence. This is how we make sure. Theodore would be proud, I said. Theodore would be annoyed it took us this long, she replied with a sad smile. He always thought we should move faster, do more. But I think he'd be glad we're trying. That night, I sat in the garden of the Institute and wrote a letter of my own. Not to anyone living. Just a letter. To a man who'd been dead for 3 years but whose impact kept rippling outward like stones thrown in water. Dear Theodore, I went to the ocean. You were right. It's exactly how I described it to you, though I'd never seen it before. I stood in the waves and thought about how you died having never seen it, and I was angry at you all over again. But then I met a girl there. She was maybe 10 years old, playing in the surf with her mother. And I realized that girl would never be sold. Never be trained to die. Never be told her life was less valuable than someone else's. 'Cause you changed the rules. That's 30 years of life you gave her. Maybe 50. And she'll have daughters, and they'll have daughters. And none of them will ever know they should be grateful to you. They'll just live like living is a right instead of a privilege. I think that would make you happy. The anonymity of it. The way your death is becoming part of the foundation that girls like her stand on without ever knowing it's there. We're building something, Theodore. All of us, the Decoy girls. We're making sure that what happened to us becomes the thing that never happens again. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. Florence still has nightmares sometimes. Harriet says she's too busy to grieve properly, but I see it in her face when she thinks no one's looking. Lucille writes stories about girls who save themselves because no one else will. Me. Angry. Ill. Maybe always. But we're alive. And we're free. And that's because of you. I don't know if you can hear this wherever you are. I don't know if any of the moon goddess stuff is real or if death is just nothing. But if you can hear me, I want you to know it worked. Your impossible, idiotic, beautiful plan worked. You saved us. All of us. And we won't waste it. Yours in this life and whatever comes after, Maybelle. 5 years after the wedding, I met someone. His name was Calvin, and he was a carpenter in a small pack near the coast. We met when I was passing through, telling our story at the local gathering hall. He stayed after, asked questions, really listened to the answers. We started corresponding. Letters at first, then visits. He was patient with my anger, my grief, my complicated feelings about trust and love and letting someone see me. I'm not easy, I warned him once. I'm difficult and I'm broken and I don't know if I'll ever be normal. Good, he said. Normal is overrated. And you're not broken. You're just forged differently. Harder. Stronger. That's a nice way of saying traumatized. It's an accurate way of saying survivor. I kissed him for the first time on a beach at sunset. And I thought about Theodore, about his letter, about how he'd wanted me to kiss someone. To live fully. And I cried because I was happy and sad at the same time, grateful and angry. In love with the man in front of me while grieving the one who died so I could have this moment. Calvin held me while I cried and didn't ask me to explain. He just let me feel it all. That's when I knew I loved him. 10 years after the wedding, the last member of the old council died. Percival, the stern wolf who'd defended the Decoy program until his final breath, passed away in his sleep. There was a state funeral. I didn't attend. But I did attend the council session where his replacement was chosen. And I smiled when Florence was nominated. Florence, who'd wanted to run away. Who'd been so scared she could barely sleep. Who'd bought a bookshop and turned it into a gathering place for women to share their stories and organize for change. She was confirmed unanimously. I don't know what I'm doing, she confessed to me afterward. None of us do, I said. But you'll figure it out. And you'll do it with people who believe girls matter. That's more than the last council had. Harriet became the chief healer 3 years later. Lucille's books were taught in schools across every pack. Me. I became the director of the Maybelle Institute when Genevieve stepped down to focus on her family. The 4 of us, the girls who'd spent that last night together, holding hands and sharing wishes, were now the women shaping policy, healing communities, educating the next generation, and making sure the truth was never buried. We'd become exactly what they'd tried to prevent. Powerful. 15 years after the wedding, they unveiled a memorial to Theodore in the sacred grove. It wasn't a statue. Theodore would have hated a statue. Instead, it was a garden. 30 trees planted in a circle, one for each Decoy girl. In the center, a simple stone with an inscription. Here stood Theodore Shadowfang, Alpha King, who chose to die so others could live. May we honor his memory by choosing differently. All 30 of us came for the dedication. We were in our mid-30s now. Our lives fully formed around the choices we'd made with our gifted freedom. Some of us had families. Some didn't. Some had found their callings. Some were still searching. But all of us were alive, and that was what mattered. After the ceremony, I stayed behind while the others left. I sat under one of the trees, the one planted for me, and I talked to Theodore like I had dozens of times over the years. Your brother's doing well, I told him. Better than expected, honestly. He's not you, but he's good. Fair. Willing to listen. The pack is thriving. The wind rustled through the leaves, and I pretended it was an answer. The curse is still broken. No alpha king has died on their wedding night since you. Turns out all it took was one person being willing to rewrite the rules instead of following them. I pulled his letter from my pocket. I carried it everywhere, even after 15 years. The paper was worn soft from being read so many times. I'm married, I said. His name is Calvin, and he's good to me. Patient with my nightmares, my anger, all the complicated ways your death shaped me. We have a daughter. I named her Theodora. Not after the woman who ran the Decoy house, but after you. The good kind of Theodore. A tear slipped down my cheek. She's 3. The same age I was when my mother sold me. And every time I look at her, I think about how I would burn the world down before I let anyone treat her as disposable. Every time I hold her, I understand a little more why you did what you did. Because she's worth dying for. Worth changing everything for. Worth breaking every rule and facing every consequence for. The garden was quiet except for birdsong and the whisper of wind through leaves. I'm not angry at you anymore, I said softly. I was for a long time. Furious that you died, that you'd left us, that you'd made me care about you and then disappeared. But I understand now. You didn't die because you thought you were worth less than us. You died because you knew we were worth more than they'd told us. And someone needed to prove it. I stood up, pressed my palm against the tree that bore my name. Thank you, I whispered. For seeing me. For trying. For changing the world just enough that my daughter will grow up free. I left the garden then, walked back toward the capital where Calvin and little Theodora were waiting. But I looked back once, at the circle of trees, at the memorial to the man who'd chosen differently. And I could have sworn, maybe it was imagination, maybe it was the grief that never fully leaves, maybe it was something else entirely, that I saw him standing there. Just for a moment. Just long enough to smile at me, to nod, to tell me without words that it was okay. That he'd do it again. Then he was gone if he'd ever been there at all. But the trees remained. The garden remained. The world he'd changed remained. And we remained. 30 women who'd been bought to die and chose to live instead. That was his legacy. Not a broken curse. Not a dead alpha king. But a world where girls like us, like my daughter, like all the daughters to come, would know they mattered. Would know they were more than the roles assigned to them. Would know they were worth fighting for. Worth dying for. Worth living for. 20 years after the wedding, I'm standing in front of a crowd again. But this time I'm not a decoy in a white dress, waiting to die. I'm a woman with gray threading through my hair, with a family waiting at home, with a life I built from borrowed time and blood-bought freedom. I'm standing at a university, one that exists because Genevieve founded it, because Florence fought for its funding, because Harriet trained its healers, because Lucille's books filled its library. And I'm telling our story, again, like I have hundreds of times before. Because this is what I do now, I make sure no one forgets. I make sure the sanitized version doesn't become the only version. I make sure people understand exactly what the old ways cost. In the audience I see young faces. Girls and boys who were born after Theodore died. Who don't remember a time when the Decoy house existed. Who take their freedom for granted in the best possible way. This is what we fought for. This beautiful, ordinary ignorance of how bad things used to be. But they need to know anyway. Because the moment we forget how bad it was, we risk letting it become bad again. So I tell them about a girl named Maybelle who was sold at 4 years old. About 29 other girls who were bought and trained and told they didn't matter. About an alpha king who decided one life couldn't be worth more than 30 others. I tell them about the real cost of their freedom. And when I'm done, when the lecture hall erupts in questions and discussions and righteous anger about things that happened before they were born, I smile. Because this engagement, this passion, this refusal to accept injustice even when it doesn't affect them personally, this is Theodore's real legacy. Not the broken curse. Not the reformed council. Not even the laws that protect children now. His legacy is a generation that believes people matter. All people. Not just the convenient ones. Not just the powerful ones. Everyone. He taught us that by dying. But more importantly, he taught us that by living. Those 3 months when he fought so hard to find another way. When he made us believe we were worth saving. And now we're teaching it to others. Passing it forward. Making sure that the idea he died for doesn't die with us. I'm in my 50s now. And my body aches in ways it never did when I was young. Harriet says it's just age. Just wear and tear from a life fully lived. But sometimes I wonder if it's more than that. If carrying the weight of Theodore's sacrifice, of 30 girls' trauma, of a world that needed changing, if all of that leaves marks deeper than scars on wrists. Florence visits me often. Her bookshop is now a chain across multiple packs. She's published her own book, a memoir about surviving the Decoy house. It's required reading in several schools. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked me last week. We were sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, drinking tea like the old women we're becoming. "There's no such thing as enough," I said. "There's just better than before. And we've definitely achieved that. But there's still injustice. Still people being treated as less than. Still systems that—" "Florence," I interrupted gently. "We can't fix everything. We were bought to die, and instead we lived. And we used that life to make things better. That's not nothing. That's everything." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you still think about him?" "Every day," I admitted. "Less painfully than before, but yes. Always." "Me too," she said softly. "Isn't that strange? We barely knew him. A few conversations, one grand gesture, and then gone. But he shaped everything that came after." "That's the thing about being seen," I said. "Really, truly seen. Even once, even briefly, it changes you. Makes you believe you're worth the space you take up." Calvin came out then, brought us more tea, kissed the top of my head before going back inside. 25 years of marriage, and he still makes my heart skip. Theodore would be happy about that, I think. That I found love. That I let myself be happy despite the grief. "I'm writing it all down," I told Florence. "Everything. The real version, not the cleaned-up one for history books. I want my grandchildren to know what it actually was like. To understand what their grandmother survived." "Good," Florence said. "Write it angry. Write it true. Don't let anyone soften it after we're gone." We sat there until the stars came out, 2 old women who'd been girls marked for death, watching a sky that had no idea how close it came to never being seen by us at all. I'm 60 years old when Nathaniel dies. Not dramatically, not young. He lived a long life for an alpha king, died peacefully in his sleep at 87. Violet, his mate, had passed 2 years earlier. Their children were grown, their grandchildren numerous. The pack mourned him sincerely. He'd been a good alpha king, fair and progressive, always asking, is this how Theodore would want it done? When faced with difficult decisions. At his funeral, I stood with the few remaining Decoy girls. We're in our 60s now, some of us looking older, some younger, all of us marked by the years we were given. The priestess spoke about Nathaniel's accomplishments, his legacy, his devotion to his pack. And then she said something unexpected. Alpha King Nathaniel spent his entire reign in the shadow of his brother. And he never resented it. Never tried to escape it. Because Theodore's shadow wasn't darkness. It was light showing the way forward. Everything Nathaniel achieved, he achieved by asking what Theodore started. And that's perhaps the greatest tribute one brother can give another. After the ceremony, Nathaniel's eldest son, Marcus, approached me. There's something I want to show you, he said. Something grandfather kept in his private study. He made me promise to show you when the time came. He led me to the Alpha's residence, to a room I'd never entered. Nathaniel's study was warm, lined with books, filled with the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. Marcus pulled out a drawer in Nathaniel's desk. Inside was a collection of letters, dozens of them, bound with ribbon. He wrote to Uncle Theodore, Marcus explained. Every year on the anniversary of his death. Never sent them, obviously. Just wrote them. Told him about the pack, about the changes they were making, about how his sacrifice was being honored. He handed me the bundle. He wanted you to have these. Said you'd understand what they meant. I took them home and read them all, one after another, crying and laughing and grieving for two brothers I'd known in such different ways. Dear Theodore, the first one began. It's been a year since you died, and I still don't know if you were brave or stupid. Probably both. But the curse is broken. The Decoy house is closed. Maybelle and the others are free. So I guess your stupid bravery worked. I wish you were here to see it. The letters continued, year after year, chronicling changes made, battles fought, victories won. All in the name of the brother who'd died too young. The last letter was dated 3 days before Nathaniel's death. Dear Theodore, I'm dying. Peacefully thank the moon goddess. In my sleep they say like going to sleep and just not waking up. I'm not afraid. I've had 87 years. More than you, more than most. I've seen our pack transform from something cruel and rigid into something kinder, more flexible. I've watched the Decoy girls become the women who changed everything. Maybelle visited last week. She's old now, we all are, but she's still fierce. Still angry about the right things. Still making sure no one forgets what it cost. Think she loved you. Not in a romantic way necessarily, but in that deep way where someone's death carves out a space in you that never fully heals. I'm not worried about the pack. Marcus will be a good alpha king. I taught him everything you taught me. That power is responsibility, that rules can be changed, that people matter more than traditions. Your legacy is secure, brother. Not because of statues or memorials, but because the world you died to change has changed. And it's staying changed. I'll see you soon, I think. And I'll have so much to tell you. Your brother, Nathaniel. I cried reading that last letter. Cried for Nathaniel, who'd spent his whole life living up to a dead brother's dream. Cried for Theodore, who never got to see what his death accomplished. Cried for all of us, living in the space between what was and what could have been. But mostly I cried because it was beautiful. This unbroken chain of love and memory and determination to honor a sacrifice that should never have been necessary. I'm 72 when I go back to the village where I was born. I haven't been back since I was 4, since my mother sold me for a purse of coins. I don't know why I decide to go now. Maybe because I'm old enough that facing the past doesn't feel as dangerous. Maybe because I need to see where I came from before I leave this world entirely. The village has changed. It's more prosperous now. The mines are closed, replaced by sustainable farms and a thriving textile trade. The poverty that made selling children seem reasonable is mostly gone, replaced by modest but stable livelihoods. I find my mother's house without trying. Some part of me remembers, even after almost 70 years. She still lives there. She's 93, ancient and bent, sitting on a porch I remember from a child's perspective. She doesn't recognize me when I walk up. "Can I help you?" she asks, her voice wavering with age. "I'm Maybelle," I say. "Your daughter." Her face goes white. For a moment I think she might faint. Then tears start streaming down her weathered cheeks. "They said you were dead," she whispers. "The Decoy house. They said all those girls died. That there was an attack at the wedding and—" "One girl died," I interrupt. "Just one out of 30. And it wasn't a girl at all. It was the Alpha King who chose to die instead." I tell her everything. Not because I forgive her. I'm not sure I do, even after all these years. But because she needs to know. She needs to understand what her choice cost, and what it ultimately led to. When I finish, she's sobbing. "I'm sorry," she keeps saying. "I'm so sorry. I was desperate. Your father was dead, we had no food. I thought I was giving you a better life." "You were giving yourself a better life," I correct her. Not angrily, just factually. I was convenient currency. I didn't know what they would do to you. They said you'd be educated, cared for. I was educated, I agree. Cared for. And trained to die in place of someone more important. Did the gold last long, Mother? Was it worth it? She can't answer. Just keeps crying these dry, rasping sobs that shake her whole body. I should feel vindicated, triumphant. But I don't. I just feel tired. And maybe a little sad for this old woman who made a terrible choice in terrible circumstances and has lived with it for 70 years. I didn't come here for revenge, I tell her finally. I came to tell you that I survived. That I built a life. That I'm happy despite what you did. I wanted you to know that your decision didn't destroy me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she says. I know, I reply. I'm not offering it. But I'm not carrying hate for you anymore either. It's too heavy and I'm too old. So I'm just letting you know. Maybelle survived. She lived. I leave without looking back. And strangely I feel lighter. Not because of anything she said or did, but because I faced the beginning of my story and realized it no longer has power over me. I am not the girl who was sold. I'm the woman who survived and thrived and changed the world despite being sold. That's enough. Florence dies when we're 75. A heart attack sudden and quick. Harriet says she probably didn't feel much pain. That's supposed to be comforting. We bury her in the sacred grove, near Theodore's memorial. It feels right somehow, that she should rest near the man who freed her from her fear. At the funeral, her grandchildren speak about her. This fierce woman who built an empire of bookstores and changed laws and never stopped fighting for children's rights. They speak about her with awe, with love, with pride. They don't know she used to tremble at the thought of her own death. That she had nightmares until she was 50. That she carried fear like a second skin for decades. All they know is the strong woman she became after. Should we tell them? Lucille asks me afterward. We're standing by Florence's grave. Just the remaining Decoy girls. There are 14 of us left now. The years have claimed the others. Illness, accidents, the simple wearing down of bodies that survived past their expiration date. Tell them what? Harriet asked. How scared she was. How broken we all were. Do they need to know that part? Think about it. About how we curate the stories of the dead. Choose which truths to preserve and which to let fade. They need to know she was scared and became brave anyway. I say finally. That's the important part. Not that she wasn't afraid, but that she kept going despite the fear. That's the real legacy. So we tell Florence's grandchildren about the Decoy house. About a girl who was so frightened she couldn't sleep, who wanted to run away, who thought she'd die young and terrified. And then we tell them about the woman who turned that fear into fuel. Who built something that mattered. Who saved countless children through her work even though she couldn't save herself. They cry. But they also understand her better. And understanding, I think, is more valuable than admiration. I'm 80 years old when I finish writing our story. It takes me 3 years to get it all down. Every detail I can remember, every conversation, every moment that mattered. Theodore's letter, Nathaniel's letters, Florence's memoir, Lucille's stories. All of it woven together into one complete narrative. The truth, unvarnished and whole. I call it The Price of Change. A Decoy bride's testament. My publisher, one of Florence's former protégés, tells me it's too long, too angry, too graphic about the realities of what was done to us. Good, I tell her. Leave it exactly as it is. It's published on the 60th anniversary of Theodore's death. I'm too old to do a book tour, but I don't need to. The story spreads itself, the way truth does when it's been waiting too long to be told. I do one interview with a young journalist who reminds me of Florence, earnest and fierce and hungry for justice. Do you think things are better now? She asks me. 60 years later, has it been worth it? Better isn't the same as good, I tell her. There's still injustice. Still people being used and discarded. Still systems that value some lives over others. But yes, it's better. And that's because people like Theodore refuse to accept that the old ways were the only ways. Do you think he would be satisfied with the progress? I laugh at that. Theodore. Well, he'd want more, faster, better. He'd be frustrated that it took 60 years to achieve what we've achieved. But he'd also be glad we kept trying. That we didn't let his death be the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. What do you want people to take from your book? She asks. I think about this for a long moment. About everything I've learned in 80 years of borrowed time. I want them to understand that change is always paid for in blood and tears and sacrifice. I say finally. And that just because someone paid that price doesn't mean we get to stop fighting. Theodore died to break a curse and free 30 girls. But we had to do the work of making that freedom mean something. His death was necessary, but it wasn't sufficient. It was a door opening. We had to walk through it. And what's on the other side of that door? She asks. More doors, I admit. More fights. More work. But also life. Real, complicated, beautiful, difficult life. The kind of life we were told we'd never have. That's what's on the other side. The chance to be fully human, fully ourselves. Fully free to make mistakes and choices and meaning. The interview airs, and I watch it with Calvin, who's 85 now and moves slowly but still makes me laugh every day. You were very profound, he says when it's over. I'm old, I counter. Everyone sounds profound when they're old. It's expected. No, he says seriously. You sound like someone who lived the kind of life that earns wisdom. That's different. He's right, I suppose. Wisdom isn't about age. It's about surviving things that should have killed you and learning from them instead of just being broken by them. Harriet dies at 81. Then Lucille at 83. Then the others one by one, year by year. I attend every funeral, stand beside every grave. Watch the number of us dwindle like a countdown I can't stop. By the time I'm 87, I'm the last one left. The last decoy bride. The last person who was in that line, who wore that white dress, who survived that cursed wedding day. Everyone else is gone. Florence, Harriet, Lucille. All 29 of the others whose names I carry like a prayer. And Theodore. Always Theodore, the ghost who's haunted me. No, not haunted. Accompanied me. Walked beside me through every year, every choice, every moment. I'm old now. Really old. The kind of old where my body hurts all the time and everything takes 3 times longer than it used to and I forget names and dates and sometimes what I was saying mid-sentence. But I remember the decoy house. I remember Theodore's eyes. I remember the feeling of his blood soaking through my dress, warm and wrong and irrevocable. Some memories don't fade. Some things are carved too deep to be worn smooth by time. I'm 91 years old and I'm dying. Harriet would tell me it's just pneumonia, perfectly treatable if I wanted treatment. But I don't. I'm tired. I'm ready. I've lived 73 years past my expiration date, and that's enough. My grandchildren are here. Calvin died 2 years ago. Peacefully, holding my hand after 62 years of marriage. Little Theodora, who's not little anymore, sits beside my bed. Tell me the story again, she says. She's heard it 100 times, but she wants to hear it once more. Wants to hear it from me before I'm gone and it becomes just a story instead of a memory. So I tell her. About a girl sold at 4. About a house full of girls trained to die. About an alpha king who chose differently. Did you love him? She asks when I'm done. Grandfather Theodore. I don't know, I admit. I barely knew him. A few conversations. 1 letter, 1 world-changing decision. How do you measure love when there's so little time? But you think about him, she presses. All the time. You named me after him. You wrote a book about him. That's love, isn't it? Maybe, I concede. Or maybe it's gratitude. Or grief. Or just recognition. He saw me when no one else did. Maybe love is just being seen and valued by someone. Maybe that's all it ever is. My breathing is getting harder. The pneumonia is winning and I'm letting it. Don't be sad, I tell Theodora. I've had a good life. Long life. I saw the ocean and kissed the man I married and watched my children grow and changed the world just a little bit. That's more than most people get. So much more than I was supposed to get. I'll miss you, she says, crying now. I'll miss you too, I whisper. But I'm going to see your grandfather. And maybe Theodore too, if any of that afterlife stuff is real. And Florence and Harriet and Lucille. All of us together again, finally. Tell them we're okay, Theodora says. Tell them the world they fought for is still here. Still changing. Still getting better. I will, I promise. And then, surrounded by my family, in a bed in a house I chose in a life I built from borrowed time, I close my eyes. I'm standing in the sacred grove. But it's different. The trees are there, all 30 of them, but they're glowing. Everything is glowing, actually. Soft and silver and impossibly beautiful. Took you long enough, a familiar voice says. I turn and there's Florence. Young again, or maybe not young, maybe just whole. The way she was before fear carved lines into her face. Florence. I breathe and then I'm running to her and we're hugging and she feels solid and real and there. About time you got here, she says, laughing and crying at the same time. We've been waiting. Harriet appears next, then Lucille. Then all the others, all 29 Decoy girls. Young and whole and free from the weight of years and trauma. Is this real? Yes. Or am I just hallucinating as I die? Does it matter? Harriet says practically. You're here. Or here. That's enough. We stand in a circle, holding hands like we used to in the Decoy house, when we were girls who thought we'd die young. Except now we're not girls. We're women who lived full lives despite everything. There's someone who wants to see you, Lucille says gently, and she gestures toward the center of the grove. Theodore stands there, young and whole, no longer haunted. He looks like he did that day in the library, strong and sad and kind. Maybelle, he says, and my name in his voice still sounds like coming home. I walk to him slowly, hardly believing he's real. Or I'm real. Or any of this is real. You came, I say stupidly. I've been waiting, he replies. 73 years. Watching you live the life I died to give you. Do you have any idea how proud I am? And then I'm crying, really crying, ugly sobbing that shakes my whole body. You shouldn't have done it, I say. You should have lived. You should have had a life too. I did have a life, he interrupts gently. Short but mine. And I spent it trying to fix something broken. That's not nothing. It wasn't fair, I insist. None of it was fair. No, he agrees. But you made it mean something. All of you did. You took what was broken and you built something better. That's all anyone can do. He pulls me into a hug, and I let myself cry against his chest. For him. For all of us. For the world that needed so much blood and sacrifice to change even a little bit. Did it work? He asks quietly. The life I gave you. Was it good? I pull back to look at him. Yes, I say. It was hard and complicated, and sometimes I was so angry I wanted to burn everything down. But yes, it was good. I was loved. Loved. I had children and grandchildren. Changed things. I mattered. Good, he says, smiling. That's all I wanted. For you to matter. For all of you to know you mattered. The other Decoy girls join us then, forming a circle around Theodore and me. 31 of us, together for the first time since that cursed wedding day. Thank you, I tell him. For seeing us. For trying. For dying so we could live. Thank you. Thank you for living, he responds. For making my death mean something. For not wasting the time I gave you. We stand there, in that glowing grove, in whatever comes after life. And I feel complete. Like a story that's finally reached its ending. Not a happy ending exactly, but a true one. And so this is how it ends. Not with a wedding or a curse or a dramatic sacrifice. But with an old woman dying peacefully, surrounded by family, after a long life well lived. With 30 girls who were bought to die but chose to live instead. With an alpha king who decided one person's death couldn't be worth more than 30 people's lives. With a world that changed slowly, painfully, because people refused to accept that the old ways were the only ways. This is my story. Maybelle's story. The story of a Decoy bride who was raised to die in the alpha king's place, but he chose to die for her instead. And this is what I learned, in 91 years of borrowed time. Change is paid for in blood and sacrifice. Always. But that payment is just the down payment. The real cost is in the work that comes after. The daily, unglamorous work of making that sacrifice mean something. Of building something better on the foundation of blood and tears. Love isn't always romantic. Sometimes love is being seen, being valued, being treated like you matter when the whole world has told you that you don't. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. And then it's defended. Every day, in small ways and large, by people who refuse to go back to being less than they are. And finally, your life doesn't have to be long to matter. Theodore lived only 25 years, but he changed everything. Sometimes one choice, one moment of courage, one refusal to accept the unacceptable, that's enough to shift the entire world. We are all decoy brides in some way. All of us taught by the world that some lives matter more than others. That some people are meant to sacrifice while others are meant to survive. That the systems we inherit can't be changed. But they can. They can be changed. Not easily. Not quickly. Not without cost. But they can be changed. Theodore taught me that. And I spent 73 years teaching it to others. Now I'm passing it to you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to live. Loudly. Fully. Without apologizing for the space you take up. I want you to question every system that tells you some people matter more than others. Every tradition that demands sacrifice from the powerless to protect the powerful. Want you to see the invisible people. The ones society has decided are disposable. See them. Value them. Fight for them. And when you're faced with a choice between preserving an unjust system and breaking it, even if breaking it costs you something, even if it's hard, even if everyone tells you it can't be done, choose to break it. Choose differently. Be the Theodore in someone else's story. Be the person who sees them when no one else does. Who values them when the world says they're worthless. Who changes the rules when the rules are wrong. Because that's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures alone, but through millions of small choices by people who refuse to accept that cruelty is inevitable. Through people who choose to see, to value, change. Through people like you. This is my story. The story of how I was raised as a decoy bride to die in the Alpha King's place. But he chose to die for me instead. It's a story about sacrifice and survival. About the price of change and the cost of freedom. About love in all its complicated forms. About 30 girls who should have died young but lived long enough to change the world. It's a story about Theodore, who chose differently. And it's a story about all of us, every person who's ever been told they don't matter, who's ever been treated as less than, who's ever been invisible to the people with power. This is for you. You matter. You always did. And anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. Live like you believe that. Fight like you know it's true. Change the world like your life depends on it. 'Cause it does. All our lives depend on it. My name is Maybelle. I was born to die, but I chose to live instead. And I'm telling you this story so you'll choose to live too. Fully. Fiercely. Unapologetically. That's how we honor the people who died for us. By living so completely, so determinately, so brilliantly that their sacrifice was worth it. That's how we change the world. One choice at a time. One life at a time. One refusal to accept the unacceptable at a time. Theodore started it. We continued it. Now it's your turn. Don't waste it. And before you go, I have one small request. I've shared my story with you. This long, difficult, beautiful story about survival and sacrifice and change. You've stayed with me through all of it, through the hard parts and the sad parts and the parts where hope seemed impossible. Thank you for that. For listening. For caring. For letting the story of 30 invisible girls matter to you. If this story touched you, if it made you think or feel or want to change something in your own world, I'd love to know. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part resonated. Tell me what you're going to do differently. Tell me how you're going to choose differently in your own life. And, this might seem strange, but humor an old woman's ghost. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because we're all connected, all of us who believe people matter. All of us who refuse to accept injustice. And sometimes knowing we're not alone in that fight is what keeps us going. Share this story if you think someone else needs to hear it. Because maybe somewhere out there is another girl being told she doesn't matter. Maybe she needs to know that's a lie. That she matters. That her life has value. That the systems that try to make her small and disposable can be changed. Maybe you're that girl. Maybe you've been told you're less than, worth less, meant to sacrifice for someone else's benefit. If that's you, I'm here to tell you, they're wrong. You matter. Your life is precious. And you deserve to take up space in this world. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not ever. Now go. Life. Choose differently. Change the world. Make Theodore's sacrifice worth it. Make my life worth it. Make your own life worth everything it is and everything it could be. The story doesn't end here. It ends with what you do next. Make it good. Then, in memory of every person who was told they didn't matter, and survived anyway.